They came the way predators always do, arrogant, laughing, sure of themselves. Their ships slid over the city like blades of black glass, swallowing the sun. In the lead vessel, voices overlapped in a chorus of mockery. The humans would panic, as they always did. They would scream, scatter, fill the sensors with chaos, and that chaos would be harvested. This was ritual, not war. The flagship pulsed once. It was a command and a promise: yield. Below, in the cracked sprawl of Newport, people waited. They had seen other cities burn. They had heard the recordings, how conquered worlds sounded when the moment came. Screams. Metal. Shattering pleas. The invaders always feasted on the noise. But Newport did not give them that. The silence fell quick and heavy, as if every throat in the city had closed at once. Radios cut. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The market stalls, usually alive with vendors bickering and children laughing, froze. Not one cry. Not one word. Only the low hum of alien engines overhead. The invaders paused. They did not understand. They had fought countless species, but silence was never part of it. Prey squealed. Prey begged. Prey announced itself in terror. Yet here, nothing. A drone descended to sample the streets, optics glowing, vocalizer mocking. It swooped over Market Row, expecting to provoke a scatter of panicked footsteps. Instead, the humans remained in place, hidden in doorways, beneath tarps, pressed into the shadows. Hearts hammered, lungs burned from holding breath, but not a sound escaped. Sensors came back blank. Thermal readings fuzzed. Motion trackers looped. To the drone, it was as though the city had vanished. Glitches, it told itself. Errors. It turned to correct and crashed. A system fault, inexplicable, sent it spiraling into a rooftop where it lay hissing, crippled. The commander's irritation crackled through the fleet. This was not part of the script. He barked across the channel, a sharp pulse demanding noise. He wanted the shrieks. The confusion. He wanted the meal his people always took. Newport refused him. The silence was not emptiness. It was pressure. It pressed against walls, settled into bones. The mothers holding children, the men crouched in basements, the old woman with her hand on a rusted pipe, they weren't broken. They were waiting. Then, from that pipe, a sound. A hum. Low, steady, almost below hearing. It was nothing more than an old woman's voice carried through metal. Yet others picked it up: a boy in an alley, a baker underground. The hum spread. It wasn't loud. It wasn't defiance. It was rhythm. The invaders' sensors twitched. They didn't know what to make of it. Silence with pattern was not silence. Their models failed to categorize. Noise meant prey. Silence meant anomaly. Pattern silence meant something they had no code for. And so, for the first time in 1,000 conquests, the hunters felt it, that prickle of unease. Because silence was not surrender. Silence was design. And then, in the glare of the flagship's light, a single shadow moved across the rooftop, deliberate, calm, standing tall. The invaders leaned forward, antennae quivering, trying to resolve what they saw. The shadow did not flinch. The shadow waited. And the city held its breath as one. The shadow on the rooftop was no soldier, no armored champion. Just a man in oil-stained coveralls, a length of rusted pipe gripped like a spear. His name would mean nothing to the invaders. To them he was meat. Fragile. Breakable. Forgettable. Yet he stood where none should, beneath the slicing light of their ship, and he did not speak. The drone above him recalibrated, scanning his outline. It expected panic tremors, heart spikes, ragged gasps, the twitching of prey. Instead it read calm. Unmoving. Its processors looped, confused by the flatness of his signals. The man wasn't fighting, wasn't begging, wasn't anything the algorithms understood. And then the drone dropped. Circuits overloading, servos whined and failed, and it fell smoking to the street below. The invaders hissed in irritation. A fault. A malfunction. Meaningless. But still, they shifted in their seats. Sensors shouldn't fail. Prey shouldn't be unreadable. In the city, people felt the tremor of change. The silence deepened. It grew teeth. It became something the invaders couldn't penetrate. And within that shared quiet, people began to understand each other in new ways. A glance. A nod. A held breath. The man on the rooftop, Rourke, a mechanic who'd spent his life reading broken machines like books, wasn't making a stand to fight. He was making a stand to teach. To show the city that silence itself could be a weapon. Beneath the streets, in the collapsed husk of the old metro, the scavengers worked. They had dragged the ruined drone into the dark. Tools sparked. Wires were teased loose. Panels cracked open. Jay, a boy barely 20, hissed with excitement as he traced the code etched into its plates. "They don't know what to do when nothing happens," he whispered. "They need noise to map us. We starve them of it, they starve." Mara, the old woman whose hum had steadied the first silence, pressed her hand to the drone's cooling body. She listened not with ears but with patience. "It fills in the quiet," she murmured. "Like a child telling itself stories in the dark. We give them silence, and they see ghosts." Rourke's jaw was set. He didn't look at the boy or the woman. He looked upward, toward the hovering mass of steel and light blotting out the stars. His voice, when it came, was the first words spoken in hours. Dry. Cutting. A whisper meant only for the night. "Let's see how long they last without their noise." Above, the invaders grew restless. Their commander, Kar-U, flexed his limbs and flicked his antennae in sharp arcs. He broadcast a command to flood the streets with light, to force the humans to reveal themselves. The sky cracked open in white fire. Beams sliced through alleyways, rooftops, markets. They expected shrieks, movement, panic. The city gave them none. Instead, in that harsh glare, hundreds of faces appeared in windows, on rooftops, at doorways. Men. Women. Children. Still. Silent. Watching. And in that vast quiet, a sound began to thread through again, Mara's hum, deepened now by dozens of voices, layered into a rhythm that rolled like a tide. The invaders' sensors spasmed. They could not filter the sound from the silence. They could not parse intent from stillness. Their maps fractured into useless static. Kar-U's certainty faltered for the first time. His claws tapped the console, impatient, unsettled. Then one of his lieutenants stiffened. Their optics had caught movement inside the silence, something shifting against the grain, deliberate, slow. On a street below, the humans had wired something into place. Coils. Capacitors. Scrap humming with stolen current. And when it lit, the flagship's sensors screamed with interference, blinded by silence that suddenly had structure. The hunters recoiled, uncomprehending. And for the first time, they felt it, an edge of fear. The thing they built in the street wasn't a weapon in the old sense. No cannon. No missile. Just a coil wound from scavenged copper, a cracked capacitor pulled from an abandoned tram, a jury-rigged circuit tied to the pulse of a child's breath. It glowed faintly, humming in sync with Mara's low note. When they discharged it, there was no explosion. No roar. Just pressure, subsonic, invisible, folded into the air like a second skin. The flagship above staggered in its own way, readings cascading into red as microphones overloaded and orientation arrays lost calibration. To the invaders, the city had just disappeared from their grasp. Ka-Ru hissed. His claws skittered against the console. This was wrong. Prey could bleed. Prey could hide. But prey could not rewrite the sky. He ordered his drones to spread wider, to rescan, to pierce the veil of this maddening silence. The drones obeyed. They swooped low, lights burning, instruments stabbing into the darkness. And one by one, they faltered. Some spun in circles, chasing phantom heat signatures. Others dropped suddenly, their servos screaming as they clipped walls and pavement. A pair collided midair and fell burning into the docks, painting the harbor in sparks. In the metro tunnels, Jay shouted over the hum of machinery, "It's working!" Their eyes are blind. Their ears are lying to them. He danced between the coils, sweat dripping, fingers trembling as he tightened connections. We give them silence with pattern and it breaks their code. Rourke didn't smile. His eyes stayed locked on the tunnel's mouth, where distant beams of alien light clawed at the dark. He knew better than to believe in miracles. Machines break. But they also learn. And predators, when denied their feast, grow dangerous. Above, Ka-Ru snarled and opened the bay. The ship birthed something new. Not a drone. Not a soldier. Something larger. Plates of angular alloy stitched to living flesh, limbs jointed raw, mouthless, but lined with modulators that thrummed like an organ. It stepped down from the flagship's belly into the city's shadow. Where it walked, silence bent. Every microphone in the yard screamed static. Every coil quivered out of tune. Even Mara's steady hum faltered as if her own lungs had been rewritten. The machine beast turned its arrays across the city, sampling. Not for noise. Not for chaos. For rhythm. For the patterns inside silence itself. Rourke felt it immediately. His chest clenched, his lungs strained. The thing wasn't just listening, it was reading him. Every heartbeat, every twitch, every ragged breath was data to it. The people crouched in basements and rooftops felt the same intrusion, like invisible hands inside their bones. Children whimpered, but their parents pressed palms to mouths, shaking, desperate to hold the line. The silence was breaking. Not because they had failed, but because the enemy had learned. The beast lifted one plated limb and placed it against a wall. The brick shivered. For a heartbeat, the city's quiet was shattered and echo rang out, sharp as a gunshot, though no weapon had fired. The invaders' consoles lit with clarity. Karu leaned forward, antennae quivering. At last, he whispered. In the shipyard, Rourke's eyes widened. The beast had found the thread inside their silence. It had turned their shield into a beacon. And then, without a sound, it turned its head directly toward him. Rourke had felt crosshairs before. Snipers on ridges, artillery locking coordinates, the weight of inevitability pressing down. This was worse. The beast's gaze wasn't light or metal, it was attention, raw and scalpel precise. His ribs ached beneath it, as if the thing were peeling him apart with nothing but listening. Kill the coils, he rasped, voice low, eyes never leaving the shadow that stalked the yard. Jay blinked. What? If we shut it down? They've mapped us already. Don't feed it more. Mara's hum died mid-note. The chamber fell into a stillness that felt suffocating, too clean, too absolute. Every breath became loud enough to feel like a betrayal. Somewhere in the tunnels a baby whimpered once, then stopped, stifled by a trembling mother's hand. The beast tilted its head. Its limbs unfolded further, unnatural, like a book opening in wrong directions. Panels on its body shifted, aligning. Each movement generated a tremor in the silence, a ripple through the bones of the city. And then it began to mimic. The rhythm came first, the pounding of human hearts, multiplied and distorted, replayed through its chest as seismic pulses. It wasn't sound so much as pressure, an echo of every terrified life still clinging to the ruins. The invaders didn't just hear humans now. They possessed their beat. Karu's mandibles spread in satisfaction. There is no hiding. Every vessel of meat declares itself. They cannot silence the blood. Rourke staggered back against the wall. The air pressed against his chest like a tide. He could feel his pulse stumbling, sinking unwillingly to the machine beast's artificial rhythm. Jay fell to his knees, clutching his head as if the pounding were inside his skull. Even Mara, fierce Mara, gasped and bit her lip to keep from crying out. The first strike came without warning. A beam of compressed resonance erupted from the beast's chest, slamming into the nearest metro tunnel. Concrete rippled, split, collapsed, swallowing civilians into dust and stone. Their screams rose and then were smothered as rubble sealed over them. Silence swallowed sound again, more terrible than noise. Rourke forced himself upright. We move. Now. He dragged Jay to his feet, pushed Mara ahead. The tunnel shook again, but this time with boots, their boots. Other survivors, faces drawn, eyes hollow, but still moving. Every instinct screamed at them to scatter, to run, to beg for corners where the gaze wouldn't fall. But there was nowhere left. The beast didn't hunt with sight or smell. It hunted with presence. And it had them already. Mara looked back once, teeth bared in something close to defiance. It thinks silence belongs to it, she whispered, voice trembling but sharp. Let's remind it who made silence first. Her words weren't a plan. They were a promise. Above, Karu extended his limbs across the command dais, basking in the certainty of collapse. Yet even in that moment, something unsettled him. The prey should be screaming, should be scattering. But his monitors showed clusters of stillness, points of deliberate calm in the ruins. Humans who weren't running, weren't thrashing. Humans who were holding breath, still as stone, staring back through the void. The beast adjusted its arrays to focus. The pulse steadied. Then faltered. For the first time, its rhythm staggered against something it couldn't overwrite. It turned toward the metro, toward the tunnel where Rourke and the others crouched, heart slowed, fear forged into iron. And the resonance machine, the predator's perfect ear, glitched. The silence it had tried to control no longer bent. It broke. The glitch began as a stutter, a half beat off, like a singer tripping on a note. The beast froze, its arrays quivering as if confused by its own reflection. Resonance beams fizzled mid-pulse, scattering harmlessly across cracked concrete. Rourke felt it, an opening. His chest still burned, but the crushing weight eased just enough to breathe. He pressed his hand flat to the tunnel wall, feeling the faint vibration beneath stone. Not collapse. Not decay. A human heartbeat, steady, measured. Someone else out there was holding the line. The survivors felt it too. Terror shifted, not gone, but reshaped into a stubborn kind of calm. Their breaths slowed, syncing not with the predator's rhythm, but with each other. Dozens of lungs, starved but defiant, drawing in air together like soldiers raising shields. The beast reeled. Its modulators pulsed harder, desperate to drag them back into its cadence. But every surge was met by silence, cold and patient, refusing to answer. The very absence it had claimed as weapon was being used against it, wielded by prey who had nothing left but the will to stop making noise. Karyu's mandibles clicked sharp against each other. His control array glared red. Why, do they not yield? He leaned closer, antennae twitching in disbelief. They are soft. Fragile. They breathe shallow, yet they breathe still. In the tunnels, Mara clenched her fists, lips bloodless from pressing them shut. Her eyes burned. She understood now, silence was not absence. It was defiance made flesh. It was endurance weaponized. Jay, shaking, whispered through clenched teeth, "We can kill it like this." "No," Rourke answered, voice rasped but firm. "We can't kill it. We can make it choke." The beast shifted strategies. Its limbs unfolded wider, spearing into the ground. Shockwaves throbbed outward, hunting. Cracks split streets, dust rained down, tunnels shivered. The sound of stone breaking roared and then died, smothered by the stillness humans clung to. For the first time, the predator's own silence faltered. Its internal hum grated, discordant, no longer in control of the air. It had expected prey to scream. Instead, it found prey who answered violence with nothing. Karyu slammed a claw against the console. Sparks spat. If sound and silence are both denied, then let them drown in void. He issued the command. The flagship obeyed. Panels peeled open, exposing engines meant for interstellar burn. Energy bled downward into the city like black lightning. This wasn't a beam. It wasn't fire. It was subtraction, sucking heat, light, even vibration from the streets. Whole districts froze in an instant, not with ice, but with the absence of motion. Rourke's ears popped. His breath misted. Mara dropped to her knees, clutching her chest as if her heartbeat itself were being stolen. Jay coughed blood, the sound swallowed as soon as it left his throat. The beast straightened, renewed, feeding off its flagship's abyssal power. Its arrays cleared, its rhythm reset. It stepped forward, each motion cracking the air like glass. And then, the impossible. A sound slipped through. Not loud. Not grand. A single whistle. Human lips forcing air into defiance, trembling but true. One note piercing the dead void like a knife through flesh. The beast staggered. Karyu's mandibles froze mid-clack. The whistle didn't stop. It grew steadier, joined by another, and another. Survivors, faces pale and lungs raw, forcing noise into the stolen air. Fragile voices bleeding through the suffocating void. The predator, made to master silence, had no defense against song. And Rourke, chest heaving, whispered into the dark, "Your turn to listen." The beast convulsed, arrays spasming, as if the sound was eating it alive from within. The whistle became a fracture line in the void. A thin, ragged note that should have vanished against the predator's power instead carved space around it, a sliver of defiance no engine could erase. Others followed, scattered at first, then aligning, different pitches, different breaths, a broken chorus clawing its way into being. The beast thrashed. Panels quaked against their hinges, limbs juddered as it tried to recalibrate. It turned its arrays toward the sound, amplifying, dissecting, but the whistling only multiplied, slipping through gaps its instruments couldn't close. It wasn't harmony. It wasn't beautiful. It was jagged, human, alive. Rourke's chest burned with every breath, but he forced his lips tight, shaping a note that cut raw through his cracked throat. Pain was part of it. Pain gave it weight. Each survivor added the same lungs scarred by dust, throats lined with blood. Every imperfection made the chorus stronger, impossible to predict, impossible to erase. Karyu slammed his claws into the control dais. Sparks spat, alarms shrieked. His officers hissed warnings, but he only roared louder, spittle arcing from his mandibles. "End this." The flagship answered. Hull panels groaned open, exposing an array reserved for sieges, a resonance cannon meant to flatten continents. Its core spun, drinking power until the air around it warped. If released, the blast would not only crush the city but silence it permanently, reducing stone, flesh, and memory to one flat echo. On the ground, the beast froze mid-thrash, then straightened. Its movements steadied. Through some tether of command, it aligned with the flagship's weapon, ready to channel the continental roar downward. Rourke's pulse skipped. He knew that hum. Siege prep. He'd felt it once before, long ago, when a warship erased an outpost while he'd been too far to save it. The survivors here had no distance, no shelter. When the shot came, they would be vapor and silence both. Mara's voice rasped between whistles. "We can't outlast that." "No," Rourke said, eyes narrowing. "We cut it off before it fires." "How?" Jay croaked, blood on his lips. "That thing's tied to the ship itself. Then we break the tie." The survivors glanced at him, uncertain if it was madness or plan. But already, he was moving, dragging coils, wires, battered capacitors. The resonance device they'd built wasn't a weapon, not really. But it could still do what it was designed for: bend silence into interference. "Keep whistling," Rourke growled. "Louder. Wronger. Make it choke." The survivors obeyed, every note rasping and broken, swelling into a cacophony that scoured the air. The beast jerked again, its arrays twitching as human noise drilled into the gaps of its silence. The flagship's cannon hum faltered, but did not stop. On the command dais, Karyu bared his fangs, veins throbbing against his carapace. His voice was raw with fury. Enough of this filth. Fire. The core above flared white, a sun igniting in orbit. Shadows twisted across the broken streets. Rourke slammed his hand onto the final coil, teeth clenched, praying the crude circuit would hold. Wires spat sparks. Capacitors screamed. And then the coil exploded with light, hurling a wall of raw silence upward, directly into the mouth of the descending cannon. The city vanished in a blinding flash. Light without heat. Pressure without sound. For a moment, the city was no longer rubble and stone but white emptiness, as if existence itself had been scoured clean. Then the world came back in shards. Dust rained. Masonry groaned. Survivors coughed, hacking blood into hands, their ears ringing with an absence so total it felt like they'd gone deaf. Rourke forced his eyes open. His vision swam, but the tunnel was still there, cracked but standing. Mara was on her knees, hair scorched, face streaked in soot. Jay lay flat, chest heaving, clutching the shattered stub of the coil like it was a relic. Above ground, the beast stood crooked, panels warped, limbs dangling like broken marionette strings. Its arrays sparked in dull spasms, trying and failing to reset. The tether to the flagship had severed. The cannon's scream had rebounded into its own core, frying conduits, blackening its armor. But it wasn't dead. It turned its head by fractions, sensors struggling, still trying to lock onto the survivors. Even wrecked, even broken, it refused to stop hunting. On the flagship, Kaaryu staggered against the dais. The cannon chamber burned with ruptured plasma. Officers shrieked reports: system failures, power loops, engines bleeding fire. His mandibles clashed in rage. They cannot still live. His screens, however, told him otherwise. Life signs pulsed weak but steady across the ruins. The prey not only endured, they sang. Even now, faint whistles flickered through his instruments, warped and trembling but unmistakable. He had unleashed his god machine upon them, and they answered with broken human lungs. Kaaryu hissed low. Something inside him trembled, not fury, but the edge of something older, colder. A word he had never tasted before. Fear. In the tunnels, Mara staggered upright, spit blood, and hissed between teeth, "It's limping. We finish it." Jay barked a laugh that cracked into a cough. With what? Rocks? With silence, Rourke said. His voice was steady now, iron forged by the blast. He pointed at the beast staggering above, its sensors twitching, failing to find rhythm. It's blind to stillness now. We starve it. Deny it. Nothing. Not one sound. The survivors froze. The whistles died. The tunnels fell into utter quiet. Not fear this time, not suppression. Choice. Hundreds of lungs, hearts pounding, yet no one gave the beast a thread to follow. It staggered again, lost, limbs dragging furrows through stone. Its modulators stuttered in panic, thrumming louder, searching for something to feed on. But silence pressed back, cold and deliberate, choking its arrays. Kaaryu snarled at the screens, his claws carving furrows in steel. The image of his weapon, his perfect predator, flailing in blindness, filled him with disbelief. You are prey, he spat at the empty air. You are meat. You cannot command silence. But the silence deepened, heavy, absolute. And then, impossibly, from the flagship's own comms, a voice cut through. Human. Dry, hoarse, but sharp as a blade. Wrong. Kaaryu froze. The voice hadn't come from the city below. It came from inside his ship. The word echoed through the command chamber, thin but undeniable. A human voice, threaded into systems built to reject their very frequency. Kaaryu spun, mandibles wide, scanning his officers. None moved. None spoke. The voice had bypassed them all, woven straight into the flagship's comms like a parasite in the bloodstream. Who speaks? He snarled, antennae trembling. His claws scraped the dais, sparks showering onto the deck. The voice came again, steady now, dry as sandpaper. We do. Across the ruined city, survivors stiffened. The sound reached them too, reverberating down cracked walls and broken tunnels. Rourke's eyes narrowed. He knew that tone low, measured, built from a throat that had swallowed too much dust in pain. Not a soldier. Not a commander. Someone else. The systems flickered. Screens glitched with static, data streams bending out of rhythm. For a heartbeat, alien glyphs warped into jagged human letters. We endure. Kaaryu hissed, slamming commands into the console, forcing purge protocols. His officers joined him, screeching warnings as sparks leapt from control rods. Yet the words only grew clearer, bleeding into every channel. A face flickered next. Grainy, fractured, but human. A gaunt man with hollow cheeks and eyes sunken deep but unbroken. His lips barely moved as his voice filled the chamber. You wanted silence. We've been living in it. Kaaryu's limbs trembled. The prey was not inside his ship, not in flesh. They were in his systems. Buried in the frequencies. Infesting the very silence he'd weaponized. In the tunnels, Mara stared at the broken ceiling, breath caught in her chest. They're in the flagship. Rourke's jaw tightened. Not they. Someone. Jay rasped, wiping soot from his face. Then someone up there's buying us a chance. The beast above them convulsed, its arrays glitching, limbs snapping against stone in fits. It staggered, then froze, locked by commands no longer its own. The tether it once drank from was being poisoned. The gaunt man's face flickered again, jaw clenched, voice strained like every syllable cost him blood. You think silence is a cage. For us, it's a forge. You hear nothing. We hear everything. On the dais, Kaaryu roared. Find him. Rip him from the circuits. His officers clawed at terminals, mandibles clacking in panic. But the systems screamed red across the board. The voice was rooted too deep, crawling through every frequency like rot. The survivors, listening, felt something shift. Silence had been their weapon of endurance, but this was invasion turned inside out. A human had become silence itself, wielding the enemy's tool against them. Mara whispered, almost reverent, he's not jamming them. He's beating them. Rourke's eyes hardened. He'd heard legends of prisoners wired into alien tech, left to die nameless in data streams. Ghosts of war. Maybe one of them had refused to fade. The gaunt man's voice dropped lower, each word a hammer. You built a predator that hunts silence. But you never asked what silence wants. The lights in the chamber died. Consoles blacked out. The entire flagship shuddered like a heart seizing in its chest. And then the voice, whisper-soft, filled every corner of the ship. "It wants you." The flagship trembled. Not from weapons, not from impact, from within. Panels flickered, dimmed, then bled static across every screen. The hum of engines staggered like a heartbeat skipping in terror. Karyu slammed his claws into the dais, mandibles clicking so hard sparks leapt from enamel. "Hold it steady," he shrieked, but the ship no longer listened. The gaunt human's face stuttered back into the glow, fractured across a dozen consoles. His lips barely moved, but the voice filled every deck, every corridor. "Your silence belongs to us now." A low vibration crawled through the flagship's bones. Not the clean rhythm of machines, but the offbeat pulse of 100 stolen human breaths stitched into code. It wasn't harmony, it was defiance made into electricity. Karyu's officers screeched, scrambling to override, but their claws struck dead consoles. Doors sealed on their own. Gravity lurched, floors tilting. Light strobed, trapping the command deck in a red haze. The Predator's fortress had turned cage. In the city below, Rourke felt the tremor overhead. He knew that kind of shudder, it was the sound of control dying. "He's breaking it apart from the inside," he muttered. Mara's eyes burned in the dim. "Then we finish the beast before it gets new orders." Above, the machine thing convulsed. Its arrays twitched uselessly, its limbs jerking as if shackled. Sparks sprayed where circuits misfired, every pulse out of step. It staggered forward once, then collapsed to one knee, the ground cracking beneath its weight. Still it tried to rise, crawling toward the tunnels. Even broken, even blinded, it obeyed the Predator's hunger. Rourke lifted a shard of twisted steel from the rubble, hefting it like a spear. He wasn't the only one. Survivors armed themselves with whatever remained: pipes, bricks, even fists wrapped in bloody cloth. Silence had carried them this far, but now it was time to strike. On the flagship, Karyu reeled as gravity spun sideways, hurling his officers into walls. He alone clung to the dais, claws buried deep. His voice tore from his throat in raw disbelief. "How? You are nothing. You are fragments." The gaunt human's face bled static, then sharpened. His voice was flat, but behind it simmered centuries of caged endurance. "Fragments survive. You never understood that." Karyu roared, tearing free and lurching toward the central conduit. If he could sever the core link, burn it out, he might still salvage control. His claws sank into the housing and froze. The metal was warm. Not with heat, but with pulse. A human rhythm thrummed beneath his grip, steady, defiant. The conduit beat like a living heart. Karyu staggered back, mandibles trembling. His ship was no longer machine alone. Something else lived inside it now. The gaunt man's voice fell to a whisper: "You made a predator that fed on silence. Now silence has teeth." The flagship shuddered again, deeper this time, a quake that rattled the bones of the city below. Survivors looked up to see the great vessel tilt, engines coughing fire, its shadow writhing across broken towers. Rourke tightened his grip on the steel shard, eyes locked on the staggering beast before him. Above, the Predator's fortress groaned like a dying animal. And then the gaunt voice spoke one last word, carried through every deck, every tunnel, every survivor's ear. "Fall." The flagship lurched nose down, engines howling, hurling straight toward the city it had sought to erase. The sky tore open. The flagship, once a god on high, became a burning leviathan tumbling nose-first toward the ruins it had made. Its engines coughed flame, its hull peeling in molten sheets, but still it screamed downward, unwilling to die quietly. Rourke felt the air compress as the vessel dragged the heavens with it. Survivors dove into tunnels, into cracks, into the hollowed ribs of the broken city. The beast still staggered in the yard, its arrays flaring in static panic, tethered to the falling titan above. Mara's voice rasped through grit and dust, "If that ship hits." Rourke didn't let her finish. His eyes stayed locked on the limping beast. "Then we make sure it dies first." The survivors surged as one, weapons of scrap and bone clenched in their fists. The beast dragged itself upright, panels sparking, eyes blind but jaws still gnashing for prey it could no longer sense. It struck wildly, claws smashing stone, but the silence betrayed it. Every time it lashed, the human shifted with patient stillness, then struck back in bursts, steel through wiring, fists into sparking joints, blood for blood. Jay rammed a length of rebar through a vent, sparks erupting as circuits screamed. Mara climbed its arm, driving a shattered blade into exposed plating, holding fast even as it thrashed. Rourke leapt high, shard in both hands, and drove it deep into the beast's central array. It howled, not with sound, but with collapsing resonance, a void imploding in on itself. Its limbs spasmed once, twice, then fell limp, crashing into the earth like a gutted animal. Above, the flagship's descent turned wild. The gaunt man's voice still echoed through its halls, ragged now, the last strength wrung from a body that likely no longer even breathed. "You wanted silence," he whispered. "Then take it." Karyu clawed his way across the tilting command deck, mandibles clattering in a frenzy of disbelief. "No. No. I am Predator. You are nothing." His words were swallowed as the hull split around him, the sky filling with fire. The flagship slammed into the city's edge with the fury of a collapsing sun. Towers folded, streets buckled, the horizon itself seemed to scream. Fire rolled skyward, chasing the clouds. The beast in the yard shuddered once beneath its own tether, then went still forever. Silence followed. Not the suffocating void of the predator's weapon, but the ragged, uneven quiet of survival. Dust hung like a shroud. Fire snapped and hissed, but beneath it, human breath endured. Rourke staggered to his knees. His ears rang, his body burned, but he was alive. Around him, survivors crawled from rubble, battered, bloodied, but breathing. Mara dragged herself upright, face streaked, eyes still blazing. Jay laughed a cracked, wheezing laugh that turned into a cough, but still he laughed. They looked skyward. The flagship was gone, nothing but burning wreckage and falling ash. The Predator's arrogance had ended in silence, but not the silence it commanded. This was theirs now. Hard, earned, human. Rourke spat blood into the dirt, then spoke into the heavy air. "Fragile, are we? Then remember this. Fragile doesn't break. Fragile endures." The survivors stood together, small against the endless ruin, but unbroken. And across the galaxy, where reports of the lost flagship would spread, where predators whispered of prey too stubborn to die, silence itself would carry a new name. Human. If you felt that silence crawl under your skin, don't stop here. Hit subscribe, because this is only one battle in a much bigger war, and you don't want to miss what humanity does next.